Hello, and welcome to Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast. We are your hosts, Cody Norman
and Logan Fry, paralysis recovery specialist at the Perfect Step, also known as TPS.
We are not doctors and are not prescribing anything, as this podcast is for informational purposes and should not be considered legal advice.
We are, however, sharing knowledge and experience that we have gained from working for years with clients in the paralysis community.
The guests on this podcast will include either experts in their respective fields or individuals sharing their unique experiences with paralysis.
Suggestions and advice that we share may affect each person differently, as not one injury or diagnosis is the exact same.
We are hopeful that the outreach of this podcast will allow us to give help and guidance for individuals suffering from paralysis.
We understand that this spread of knowledge is important and takes an entire community coming together. Welcome back to Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast. On episode 3, we interviewed Ashton Wray. Ashton is the Director of Development and Education here at the Perfect Step with over 10 years of hands-on experience.
On this episode, Ashton will cover a variety of topics, including her personal experiences and how she got into the field, the Perfect Steps evaluation protocols and methodology, and many other factors about the paralysis community. Stay tuned so we can roll on to Ashton's Pathways of Healing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast. We have Ashton on today.
Hello, everyone.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Ashton, can you give us a little bit of a rundown of your background from University of Colorado Boulder and your bachelor's was in Integrated Physiology? Can you kind of give us a rundown of what that was like?
Of course. So I was born and raised in California and then decided to venture out of California and, like you said, to go to University of Colorado in Boulder. Go Buffs. And I knew growing up from a pretty early age that I liked sports and rehab and exercise and, just being active. And so I felt like more of the PT route was the route I wanted to go. And that led me to the degree in integrated physiology. It was pre-med, but not going to be a doctor or anything because it wasn't a doctorate of PT at that time. And a reason why I went to Colorado, one was my brother was already there. So that opened up a lens for me of going out of state. And as a family, we were really active in all seasons of life, but specifically the winter and skiing. And I grew up skiing since the age of 3.5. And so that was a big calling for me of Colorado and going there to be able to ski different mountains and keep going in that field of, maintaining the winter life, I guess, because you don't get a whole lot of that here in California. And I loved being there, and my major loved it because it led me to here working at the Perfect Step. But it was definitely hard. Definitely kicked my butt for sure, but graduated and like I said, led me here today.
Very nice. Did you enjoy your college experience?
I did. Yeah, it was hard in the beginning, obviously, being away. I'm a very family-oriented person. And like I said, just growing up in California. The first year or two were definitely hard. I also had a lot of sickness, so that made it even harder being away from family. But like I said, I had my brother, which was definitely a big help. I grew up playing soccer competitively, and I decided not to play in college. And that definitely ended up being a regret in college.
Why'd you choose not to?
I was burnt out playing for so long and playing competitively and club soccer for a long time. I kind of just wanted to go and experience soccer not experience the college life, not playing soccer. And then also knowing who I am as a student, knowing the path I wanted with my career and my education, that I was going to have to focus a little bit more on that and not live like the D1 athlete life. But like I said, that definitely ended up being a regret for sure. If I could go back in time, I would probably play in college.
Did you ever get bored going from living that lifestyle of being an athlete to where you're always can go to practice, always do something like that, to where when you went to college and you didn't have to experience that? Did you get bored, or did you just push everything into schoolwork?
I don't know if bored is the right word. I think it was hard for me. Honestly, I realized all my friends, almost all my friends came from soccer. And like growing up being an athlete. And so when I was in a new state and a new place trying to adapt, and for people who know me, I'm a little bit more of an introvert. So that was hard for me. And that was, I think, more of the aspect of the regret. I was like, how do I make friends? It was always just somewhat handed to me just being on a team. So that was hard. So much of a regret that I actually ended up playing my freshman year. University of Colorado is a D1 school, but they also had a very big club life for certain sports. Very much like growing up playing club. You traveled. It was still very serious. It wasn't just like the play for fun. I forget the term of those.
Like intramural?
Yeah, like an intramural. It was more intense than that, and definitely still competitive, which I liked. So I did play that my freshman year. I was too late to try and be like a walk-on for the D1 team, and I enjoyed it, but I ended up not liking the coach or the program very much. So I stopped after my freshman year and just focused on school and became a big fan of our basketball team and our football team, even though until this last year our football team wasn't that great. Go Coach Prime. But yeah.
I was going to ask you, actually, what activities and like clubs did you do after that freshman year? Like, what else did you said you went and watched like football games and basketball games. What else did you do?
Well, like I said, I definitely did a lot of skiing, which wasn't totally like related to school, but found friends that loved that as well. Did a lot with my brother. But yeah, that was another reason why I actually went to Colorado. The other school I was looking at was Monterey Bay up in Northern California, which if you compare the two are polar opposites. Monterey Bay is a lot smaller, obviously has a sports life, but isn't as big. I don't think they're a D1 school. Can't remember. And I just remember, again, like I said earlier, I really love sports, grew up around it, grew up going to Angel games. My parents have season tickets, so sports has always been a big thing. And so I really wanted a college where I could get into like that life, whether it was me playing or me watching. And so much so that I actually, my junior and senior year, in quotes, I would say, traveled with the basketball team. I won some like competitions and then just became a very well-known fan that they took a lot of students to like the Pac-12 tournament that was actually here in California, to the NCAA tournament, and like expenses paid, all that, like literally just wanted students there to cheer on the team. And like I said, did that all of my junior year and my senior year. Like went to New Mexico, California, Texas, and yeah, so that was really cool, and obviously met some really dedicated fans and friends through that. Yeah.
Did you ever like want to become like an athletic trainer and like dive into that field working with athletes?
I did actually, but it was post realizing being a PT might have not been the route for me or the career for me. So I did some internships in college and inpatient and outpatient. Definitely realized inpatient in a hospital setting was 100% not for me. So then I went to an outpatient setting, and I still loved definitely like the rehab setting. But I wasn't totally fond. It might have just been that like center that I was at, but how much the PT wasn't actually involved in the one-on-one hands-on. They just really did like the eval and then, set a form for the other like PTs or PT assistants and like handed that off. And I definitely wanted to be like in the grit, in the thick of it, and really like with somebody. So when I graduated, I ended up moving back to California, and I did an internship at Bonita High School under the athletic trainer, and I loved it. And it really like took rehab and the sports life. why I didn't continue on that was at the time, obviously with sports, you guys know, being athletes as well, it's like games and practice all the time. Well, as the athletic trainer, you're there with the games and practices all the time, whether that's early in the morning, at night, on weekends. And just coming out of college, still being young and knowing I like really wanted to eventually get married and start a family, that lifestyle and that just like time, the like time of day that it took to do those things, or like be an athletic trainer, I knew wasn't going to like fit what I was wanting in my life at that time and in the next like couple years. So maybe down the road one day. That's definitely still a want. My like ultimate dream, it's not going to happen, but for a very long time, my ultimate dream was to be like the athletic trainer PT for a baseball team in the MLB.
Like the Angels.
The Angels,
Ooh,
but
that
I mean,
sucks.
I love baseball so much and sports so much that it could be any team, well, almost any team, but
It's not the Red
it
Sox.
would be the best that it could be the Angels.
I don't know about the best, but probably the Red Sox would be the best. But you touched on a lot of good stuff right there. First thing I have to say is yes, athletic trainers always there. Shout out Joe. Thank you for everything. Allowed me and Logan to stay athletes for a little bit longer than we would have been able to without her. So appreciate you.
Yep.
And you talked about you wanted the experience of being in the thick of it, really getting in the hands-on training. And that led you to becoming what you are right now, a specialist and director of education at Perfect Step. Can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Yeah. I, like Cody said, I am a director of education and development here at the Perfect Step. Before I became that role, I actually, when I first was hired on here at TPS, I was an assistant, also known as an aide, and fell in love with it from like week one. And like I said, it still had the rehab side of things that I've always been like looking for and thinking that was the field that I was wanting to go into. And the aspect of wanting to continue to help people and whatnot. But even just being the aide, I felt very involved. And like I said, fell in love with right away, and knowing that hopefully one day I could grow into more of the specialist trainer role. And within 7 months, we were growing so fast that they asked if that was a want for me. And I said, definitely. And I think like 2 weeks later, I started being trained as a specialist.
7 months? That's a long time.
Until being asked?
Yeah.
What, did you beat me?
I did.
Oh.
I think
It might have been less than that. I don't know. It's a guesstimate. I've been here for 10 years, Cody. That's that's 10 years ago that I have to remember. But
Exactly. I don't get to give that much back, so I gotta take the wins.
Yeah, no.
So what about that role? Because you talked about wanting to help people. So what about like that role as an assistant kind of made you realize like this is a good role for me to be able to help people? And not only that role, but also when you became a specialist too. Like what about helping people like made you feel enticed?
Yeah, I've always had a philanthropic heart. Being a Jewish woman, we, and like born and raised in the Jewish faith, it's been a lot of learning of always giving back, and doing chores around the house. At the end of the week, we were given an allowance, but then like half of my allowance had to go to what's called tzedakah in the Jewish faith. And then that was given to my temple, who then would take that money and, send it to Israel or plant trees somewhere. And it was always like giving. And so I feel like from a very early age, I was being taught of like giving back and wanting to help others and realizing the fortunes I have. And so I feel like that just like continued with me throughout life and wanting to take that into a career. And so this career and this job and this company 100% fulfills that for me. I think to answer more specifically your question, as an aide, I was able to get that in two ways of, yes, helping our clients, but I'm the assistant to the specialist. So I was able to, fill fill that want in two different ways of like helping someone in need, but then also helping the specialist and like being able to learn through helping. So yeah.
That's something honestly that like I miss kind of all the time, like because of being a full-time specialist now. Like I miss being able to go from client to client as an assistant and then talk to multiple different clients and catch up with them and see what their life's been about, you know?
Yeah. That's
probably the biggest thing I think I'd say I miss about being an assistant.
It is a hard transition for sure. Like you get to talk to almost every single client that comes in on a daily basis. So then obviously you grow probably a deeper relationship with like your clients because now you are with them longer, whereas, you know, the assistants you're bouncing in and out throughout their sessions.
Right.
But it is hard because, you know, you feel like you're almost growing with them. And then you're like, oh, I feel like I haven't seen them in 2 weeks, but you've both been in the same building, but you just don't get to have, you know, those catch-up conversations or more those intimate conversations.
Yeah, the personal relationship isn't as close-knit as it is when you're in aid, and you can really bounce around and be with everybody. And I think the other thing about it that I kind of miss is when you get to experience one of the specialists creating an accomplishment for them or that client getting an accomplishment, you feel involved. So you feel involved in almost every single accomplishment that's going on in the building versus when you're a specialist. Like, yeah, the accomplishment can mean a little bit more because you feel like more so you helped, but I don't even know if that's the case because I feel like as an aide, you do feel responsible for what they're doing and the accomplishments that they're able to maintain.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I would agree.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, and to add on that too, I think that those accomplishments like are felt a little bit more, like you said. You know, it's like you see the milestones of our clients on the screen and you're like, I helped that client, I helped that client, I helped that client, you know. But like we kind of mentioned this in previous podcasts too. Not only did I help them, but they also helped me, you know. They helped
100%.
me to feel the satisfaction, I guess, but also to feel like the wholeheartedness of being able to help them, being able to be that person to help them.
100%. So. I think that's one of the biggest things that I love about this job is that as much as I am helping someone or I am like helping a staff member, I'm growing like just as much because of every new teaching or every new exercise or every new client. I feel that I'm still learning. And that's like the most exciting part about this job is that it's you're constantly learning and you're constantly growing. And especially now in the role of being director in development of education and like training new staff, I really just feel like I've said that I trained both of you guys being specialists and aides, I think, that just with how much teaching it is, I feel like I learned just as much. And like with every person, I get better, or I learn more, or I have to adapt because someone's learning style is different. And I just feel like it's really helped me grow as a professional, but then obviously also as a human.
Yeah, learning something and being able to know it well enough to teach it are two way different things. Yeah. But you did touch on how you trained me and Logan here. Can you explain what those processes were like and how we were similar in some ways and maybe different?
Yeah, let me think back just a little bit. Obviously, Cody, you were hired on first, and so were you already a specialist when Logan got hired on?
I think he was a hybrid.
Yeah, I think I was a hybrid.
Okay.
Yeah, I was doing both roles.
Okay. Well, you both came from the same college. You both were baseball players, so you had definitely a good, good mentality of, you know, being serious and taking direction like really well. But you definitely were very different in a way where Logan was a lot more like vocal on like what he was feeling and what he was seeing. And if he wasn't catching on to something where you, Cody, definitely internalized it, I remember a lot more. It was a little bit harder to read you. And the only thing is, I think maybe the other difference was Cody, maybe you exude, maybe because you hit it a little bit more like confidence in what you were doing. Where you, Logan, you were definitely a little bit more vocal of like, I want to do that again. I don't feel like I have it to the degree that I should have it. So I would say those are probably the two differences between the two of you, but you both were really fun to train and very easy to train.
What would you say is the hardest thing about training somebody to either be an assistant or to be a specialist?
Oof.
In general. It doesn't have to be based on one specific person.
Yeah. I think the answer is a little bit easier for me to say on the specialist side. I just think our methodology is really complex in a lot of ways. And if you're not, especially if someone hasn't been an assistant before, it is a big thing to capture. I think from the outside eye and just like watching or shadowing, like for someone who was an assistant before, obviously they've seen specialists and they have their hands in, like we were just talking about, they have their hands in it so much. But I will say, tip to all of us as specialists, I think we make it look a lot easier than it is. And I think it's a big eye-opening experience for someone coming into the specialist training. And so I think almost like reeling them back in and almost bringing back like a humble side. Like, yeah, maybe you've been in the game or maybe you have all this schooling, but it's very different than what you've been taught in school. And it's even very different from maybe what you've seen on the floor as an assistant. And so realizing there's still so much for you to learn, even if you already know a lot.
Yeah.
I agree. Once you go through all the training, but you actually get to pick up somebody's legs for the first time and feel what that feels like, that you get a very quick humbling nature of, I don't know what I'm doing. This is almost foreign in a sense.
Mm-hmm. I think that just actually made me think of like another answer of, it's very hard. So much of one aspect of our methodology of, you know, the table work, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's so much of it is by feel. And like in the training, obviously someone has to be watching what I'm doing, and I have to really like describe it as best I can and say, you know, but I'm having to describe what I'm feeling, and that they almost, and you as the person I'm the trainee, they can't see what I'm feeling. And so I think that is, as the trainer, that is the hard part, is so much of what we do is by feel, and they can't see what I'm feeling.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you best describe that then to somebody, like a trainee that feels confused and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to feel what you're feeling? How do you best describe how to feel that maybe in that moment? What's your best like method? I know you talk about a lot, the learn by teach method, and you kind of just talked about it earlier. Mm-hmm. But what also is something in your skill set that you feel like you do really well during the training?
Probably the best way I feel is talking a lot about body mechanics. Mm-hmm. And so like the angle maybe like my wrist is at, or like to achieve what we want to achieve as specialists, I feel like we put our bodies in so many different positions. And so that is something that I can describe, but then they also can see. But then the biggest thing is the communication back from the client, because they can obviously, hopefully, or most of the time, feel something of what I am inputting onto their body. And so it's really important to have clients who are able to communicate that back during the training process, because they're just as much training the new employee as me. And so I really have to have a good partner in a client who can help me train the employee and give like really good feedback as well.
Yeah, I think Hal's so good at that, and that's why I think everybody needs to and gets to train on him. Just the amount of information he can give you about his sensory components of, you know, I can feel you're loading more into my hip versus when Ashton was doing it, or I can feel this rotation, or whatever it is. He's just so good at the explanation process, and it makes you feel okay that, oh, like I can actually know what I'm doing wrong now and I can fix it. And I think that helps a lot when you're going through the training process.
Yeah.
But you touched on a few different times here our methodology, the STEP method. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So STEP method stands for Special Techniques and Exercises for Paralysis. Something that we pride ourselves in here at TPS on what really sets us apart from a lot of other activity-based therapy centers. There's three main components to the STEP method, and they are pattern neural activity recruitment, which we shorten as PNAR, and then load-bearing and exercise-based therapy. And that's really one of the basis things that are I really try to get new specialists to those 3 things. It sounds simple, but again, it's really not. But they all break down into a bunch of other little things on how you can input all of that or apply that in your sessions or apply that to your client. And so that is really how, if you were to break down, if someone were to come in and break down really what we do as specialists, I would say most of us, if not all of us, should be implementing some sort of one of those 3 components, hopefully all, during a session.
I think one thing we don't consider as part of the STEP method, but it's definitely part of our approach or methodology, is also just training outside of the chair.
Yeah.
Right? Every single person comes in and the very first thing they're doing is getting out of the chair.
Mm-hmm.
And while it might not be a part of it, I think it also is, because it's something that we find so important and so critical, is during that 1, 2, sometimes 3 hours, like you're in here, you need to be out of that chair and in a position that's closer, if not in fully anatomical position.
Yeah, I think if, other than maybe the exercise-based therapy, but if we're applying PNR right, and if we're applying load bearing correctly, the best way to do that is for a client to be out of the wheelchair. So yeah, and I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that really sets us apart from other centers as well, is that all our therapy is done out of the wheelchair. And really trying to, get the body, I mean, not even just wheelchair, just away from any adaptive devices, whether that's a walker, a cane, or an AFO, or, we usually take those things away. Because if you're trying to get back to a more normal state or a more functional state, and you're relying on this piece to help you, how are you going to get there? And so that's also kind of the cool part, of being a specialist and working here, is you get to really push someone out of probably their comfort zone and really show them what they're capable of, or, work with me, let's work together and let's get you to this point.
Definitely. How do you feel like those 3 pieces of our STEP method, how do you feel like those correlate to helping to reverse the effects of the wheelchair, or to negate the effects of the wheelchair?
Well, if we were to break down the 3 of them, I think naturally that's why they became our methodology and why we came up with the STEP method, is really like for that reason. Right. We're kind of what I just said before, we're really trying to get the client to not rely on this assistive device as much as they can. And, everyone's goal is to be more independent and to be more functional. And how are we going to do that? So strip away what they're trying to rely on, and how we help them do that is through the STEP method, through these components. When applying pattern neuroactivity recruitment, it's so hard to do that, trying to have them, retrain their brain and relearn or reactivate a signal from their brain down to their muscles, if they're sitting in something or if they have an AFO on. And so, and then when it comes to load bearing, we're wanting to put gravitational and body weight load onto their joints and their muscles. And again, how are they going to do that if they're sitting in the wheelchair, or they're like leaning on one leg and they're in an AFO? Well, what about the other leg? And so stripping those assistive devices away really allows us to implement our methodology tenfold.
Yeah. Would you say that you typically individualize a program or something you're doing with a specific client for that day? Do you feel like you try to individualize not only on their goals, but also based how their body is presenting for the day?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably early on one of the biggest things I loved about this job.
Yeah.
And why I felt, again, I was still able to reach the aspect of being in like a rehab setting and a rehab field. But how it was so different from like what I learned in school and what the like multiple internships I did following PTs and even like the athletic training, but that was a little bit different, is that it's not by the book and it's not cookie cutter, and I'm not treating, every quadriplegic the same, whereas like in a PT setting, you might be treating every rotator cuff injury the same. Like you have a set of like protocols and exercises that you have to follow and like adapt to. And whereas here at TPS, I learned very early on, even as an assistant, but obviously truly learned it when I went through training and as a specialist. And, you know, every new client or every client, every day, every week that I got someone on my schedule and it continued coming in. I mean, that's been the best part is I'm only limited by my own creativity as a trainer. And I feel like that's where the true like learning has been for me is like looking within myself of, yes, I'm going to push my client, but I'm also going to push myself and not be like, oh, we've done this for the past like couple of weeks and yeah, it's working. But no, like your body's very different today. Maybe we shouldn't be sticking to that routine. I need to adapt and I need to treat you differently. And that's really what I, again, like I said early on, obviously still do, but very early on loved about this job is that, like I said, I was limited by my own creativity or limited by how I could adapt. And I think that it's really fun to be able to not just push your client out of the box, but push yourself out of the box.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. That's one of my favorite parts about working here is the fact that it's never going to get mundane. Every single day, every single client is going to be different, and you're going to get to experience something new and try to learn something new with every hour that you're hands-on with a client. You touched on pattern neural activity recruitment and exercise-based therapies as part of our training here. As a trainer, which one is more fun for you? Going out there and using your creativity to think of all these different exercises that you can accomplish a goal with, or is it the detail-oriented nature of doing a type of nervous system-based training on a client when you don't really know sometimes what's going on with their body?
He's asking the queen of modalities here.
Thanks, Logan. I think it relates honestly a lot back to Logan's just previous question. It really depends. I don't have one that I specifically love doing the most. It really just depends on what client I'm working with and what are their goals and where are they at in their recovery? Are we in the midst of we have a muscle contraction, but we don't have actual limb movement? Okay, so PNR is going to be so much more important, right? So they have the signal, they can now connect to, their brain to that muscle, but we're not actually seeing the leg move, but we can see the quad actually contract. So PNR is going to be so much more exciting and crucial for where they're at in their recovery. Maybe someone who already has some movement, or someone who already comes in, walking and is ambulatory. The exercise-based therapy is a little bit more exciting, and you get to push them more in kind of almost that personal training aspect and have it be more of a strength-based thing or a cardiovascular-based thing to help build their endurance to eventually not walk without a cane or something like that. So I find joy and excitement in all of them, but I do really think that it's client-specific on where they are in their recovery.
What were your thoughts? That's awesome. I love it. But what are your thoughts? I want to know, because you were part of our assessment/evaluation protocols that was made, the functional movement assessment, the muscle testing, all of it. In what way do those testings correlate to what you're doing with your clients every single day?
Yeah, to maybe reel that back a little bit, our evaluation system, we do day one, brand new client coming in, and then 6 months after that, and then every year after that. And like you said, what we're getting is a lot of general history and background, a medications list. We're doing an emotional contentment test. We're doing an independence and pain test, and then individual muscle testing. And then Logan, you mentioned in your question the functional movement assessment, where we're really going through different daily movement or activities and testing them in their function in that or their capability in that. I went a little long on that answer. Now I'm drawing a blank on your more pointed question.
No, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. And you're on the right track. Also, you can kind of correlate that then with also the muscle testing that we do too. Like, because you were just talking about sometimes maybe if you see a muscle flicker or if you see an initiation of a muscle contracting, but you don't see a specific movement of that joint, how would you take the muscle testing?
Are you saying your question was how do I relate the eval into what we do?
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember now.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the eval overall with everything I just said gives you a really good like baseline and background on what they can and can't do function wise, what they can feel, what they cannot feel, and then really what their goals are. And I feel like those three things really help you set the basis for like just the first couple of sessions. Obviously what they can and can't do and the sensation wise is really going to help you with PNAR. That pattern neuroactivity recruitment that we were talking about.
If you can, I don't know if you'll be able to remember the track you're on, but can you just give a 30-second snippet of what PNAR is?
Yeah. So PNAR, again, patterned neural activity recruitment, with us as the specialist and working with the client, we are hands-on trying to help the client regain back function that they don't have below their level of injury. And how we do that is through neuroplasticity. So we're trying to either use signals that are still there from the brain to the muscle and basically reactivate that signal, or we are trying to literally recreate a signal that has been lost, so almost like rewiring the brain. And so it's very mentally taxing for the client. It's a lot of obviously physical hands-on work for the specialist. And so we are working so in tune with them that like if I'm asking someone to kick out their leg, but they don't have actual quad function, then I, as the specialist, will complete the motion for them and actually extend out their leg for them. And then over hundreds to thousands of repetitions over and over, week by week, them coming in, the goal and the hope is to regain back that function. And since I, as a specialist, have been doing it for them, they should be mentally thinking about when I think this and when I'm sending this signal down from my brain to this muscle, this movement is happening. And it has been happening because I, as a specialist, have been doing it. And again, through the repetition, the goal and the hope is that that signal will eventually connect and they will be able to kick out their leg.
Perfect. Thank you. And a lot of the times that movement that you're creating is not always fully on you, right? We can elicit the movement occurring through certain reflexes, stretch reflex using the Golgi tendon organs, or pain reflexes with nerve irritation, or creating the spasm in a way from what you're really good at of taking their body through a movement pattern that you know is going to elicit a certain reaction and using that reaction to allow them to connect to that particular muscle that they're trying to activate. And I think that a lot of people think, oh, they're just sitting there, just moving for them, when a lot of the times that's not what it is. It's us trying to, a lot of the times, elicit that movement from occurring with just their body, because if their body's going to elicit it, we think that shows that connection is already somewhat there, and we're just trying to strengthen it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times to the outside eye, it just looks like we're stretching our clients, but obviously we know as practitioners and someone who were to dive deeper into methodology realize it's so much more complex than that. And that's what I was saying earlier, like even as an assistant, you see it all the time and you understand, you know about the methodology, but until you're actually doing it, it's so much harder to learn. And that's why I said this is taking a quote actually from Hal, but from early on, he's always said it's like you're dancing together. You guys are dance partners. And that's how in tune you really do have to be with your client. And so again, the feel that you have on their body and being able, like you were saying, Cody, being able to use all these different adaptations to try and like elicit something or their body is super spastic and really excited on the table, and you almost have to work with them in a different way of just trying to get them to relax their body. And that is then really testing you and your like communication as a specialist, right? Because you're probably not as hands-on, because you're just going to excite their body even more, and we need to get them into a more calm state for us to really then implement PNAR to its fullest.
And that's where the organization comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Definitely. What are some tactics that you use? Like, for example, tactics, speaking of, from I use with all of my clients, where they have an excited nervous system or somebody that's a lot more spastic or has a little bit more tonicity than somebody else. I'll use breathing techniques. And so I'll have them, either do a count breath, or I'll have them think about relaxing the nervous system as they are exhaling.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain tactic that you like to use when it comes to organizing the nervous system and having somebody calm their body?
Yeah. I definitely use breath as well. I think breath is super important and super big and plays a huge role on, how the body reacts, not just for our clients, but us as well. The other thing I really like is honestly just having them close their eyes. I mean, for people who have been to our facility, it's wonderful. It's exciting. It's very upbeat. There's music. There's a community surrounding you of assistant specialists, and then obviously all the other clients that are there working hard. And as great as it is, sometimes in those moments it could be very distracting, very stimulating. And so just the simple thing of asking them to close their eyes and then pairing that with breathing, I feel like definitely really helps. Sometimes also too, just looking in a mirror so they can almost, if they can't feel as much of what is going on with their body, being able to see it, and almost like see their body calm down or see their body go into a more like neutral state sometimes helps.
Especially having that proprioception obviously helps. But
one of the things I've done with my training more recently, I do a good amount of yoga in my personal life, and one of the things they talk about is being able to relax your face muscles. And if you can get somebody to be able to actually relax the forehead, relax the muscles of the jaws, a lot of the times the body's going to go into a more calmer state, and the rest of the body will relax as well. And I've actually found a good amount of success with some of my clients of just asking them to relax their face muscles and seeing what the body does after that point.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I have 2 kids, and through labor and delivery, one of the biggest things actually I learned was it starts in the hands and the face. And so they said the more I clench my jaw or the more I close my hands, the worse the contractions are going to be, because the rest of my body is going to tense up. And so that's great, Cody. I love that you already are applying that, because that's huge. I mean, definitely the face for sure.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool.
That's interesting.
It's going to come in handy.
Very interesting. There's one more part of the evaluation that we kind of left out, and it's a really important part of the evaluation, and it's the emotional contentment test. You spoke on it a little bit, but can we dive in a little bit deeper into that? The emotional contentment test and the quality of life test, and how those things correlate also to our program.
Yes. So like you said, part of the evaluation, we have clients fill out these 2, we call them tests, but they're more just like questionnaires. The emotional contentment test is based off the Likert scale, so it's more of just like a number grading on where they're feeling in a lot of more of like the negative feelings of, being bitter, depressed, anxious, things like that. And then asking, obviously, the more positive feelings of happy, whatnot. And then the other one is a quality of life assessment, and that goes through pain, independence, kind of where they're at, if it applies to them, of like pressure sores and bowel and bladder, things like that. And why we want those answers, because when we have them redo it at 6 months and every year after that, and years down the road, so hopefully they're in our program for a long time, we've seen success, and we're really hoping that we're not only healing and helping them physically, but we are really also helping them emotionally. And through a lot of the physical gains that they're going to get being working one-on-one with the specialists and the implementation of our methodology, that naturally we're also going to help them emotionally, right? So hopefully that they would go from, high marks on the negative side to a lot lower marks and a lot higher marks on those positive feelings side. I think also too, kind of like I said a little bit earlier, we have an incredible environment here and like a wonderful community. And I feel like our clients really come together. And so even if it's, not through the relationship they build with the staff or their specific specialists, they might get that help or the knowledge or the push that they need through other clients. And so, we're really hoping that we help clients as a whole and, emotionally, physically, mentally, and that all of that comes together with just increased quality of life and independence and, a lot less hospital stays or doctor visits or less medication. So it all comes together.
It's all encompassing, right?
Yeah.
Well said.
I love the fact that you threw in the no medications, right? Just getting into the idea that exercise can be a medication and it's going to be beneficial for every single person, no matter what your state situation. Everybody's going to be able to benefit. And I think the great part about TBS is we try to be that area where if you don't feel like you can, we want to tell you that you can't. You can come exercise. So I love that. One of the things we've been talking about on the podcast is people being able to overcome certain obstacles in their life to get to where they want to go. Can you explain to us any obstacles that you've had to go over, as I'm sure there have been many on your route to becoming a director of education here?
Oof. Well, I didn't really touch on in the beginning of how I even came to TPS. I wouldn't necessarily say this is an obstacle in my life, but it's definitely been something that has allowed me to be more aware. So my dad is actually a C5 quadriplegic. And when I came back from Colorado, moved back to California, when I was in that state of like, didn't really like what the PT was doing. And then, did the athletic training and realized I really liked it, but maybe not at this time in my life. I felt a little lost and I wasn't really sure where I was going to go. And because of my dad, being in the situation that he's in, and I guess I could say like in this community, he knew about the Be Perfect Foundation. He didn't know a whole lot about, at the time, what was called Project Walk. But he knew that there was some sort of rehab center connected to Be Perfect, or that they were partnered somehow. So I looked into it and was like, oh my gosh, I live in Upland and they're in Claremont. That's so close to me. So that's really how I got started. But to relate that back to my dad, I would say that, again, not so much an obstacle, but it's been very eye-opening. My dad is very fortunate to be a pretty high-functioning quad. As kids, though, like with his function, it's really hard for him to run and do certain like activities or sports. And so that's why skiing was like a huge thing in my family, because skiing was something that has always been very like natural for my dad to do. And so, like I said, I just feel like it's been very eye-opening once I've been here I just always saw my dad as my dad. And like, I knew that he had like a disability and ailment, but it wasn't as like big to me. But now that I'm around it, I've realized like two things. One, how incredible my dad is to be in the position that he is and to have the function that he has, and to be able to live the life and give the life to my brother and I and my mom that he has and what he has overcome. But then also too, realizing how much he still has to overcome and has to deal with on a daily basis. And I think that it's also been I don't know the right word I want to use in this moment, but I've been able to allow myself to teach almost my mom and my brother in certain ways and make them more aware. Now that I understand paralysis so much more and I understand a spinal cord injury so much more. Because again, sometimes I feel like we push that to a side with my dad and maybe get frustrated with certain things or like lack of patience with certain things, but having to like reel back in, like, no, he still has a disability. He still is partially paralyzed. And just making myself, I felt like I learned so much more about my dad and was able to help my mom and my brother and even other family understand him so much more.
Right. Other than learning that experience from being at TPS and from working here, what are some other educational resources that you're able to use that was pertaining to paralysis, whether it be like books, podcasts, somebody else, like a teacher on your way through the journey? What else were there some resources for you?
Like before I got to TPS or since I've
or
been
during,
here?
or both? Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. Like I did not look into it. Like I feel like I really like learned so much to relate like back to my dad once I was here. Again, I really just looked at him as my dad. And again, I knew what he went through, but I don't think I fully dove into it until like the first couple of months of me being an employee at the time Project Walk, now TPS. It was really eye-opening for sure. Because he would talk about it, but it wasn't like it was this big thing in my family that was always like exposed. Mm-hmm. But like you can look at my dad and you know that there's something wrong with him. So growing up and coming into this, probably nothing. I did not like try to learn about paralysis. Again, I feel like it made me very interested in the rehab field, right? Like that was a huge reason of why I wanted to go into the like rehab setting and like why I thought I wanted to be a PT. My mom also had multiple knee surgeries while I was growing up, and obviously still living at home, I was dragged to her sessions all the time. And I just found it so interesting. So between the two of them, that's really what like made me want to have interest and go into a rehab field setting. Now I would say it's my clients. Like, honestly, it's being in the grind of it day to day. And like we said before, like no client is the same. No week with a specific client is the same. You have them on a Tuesday, you have them on a Thursday. It could be completely different from Tuesday to Thursday. And I really feel that I learn and I take pride in knowing that like I'm still learning. And so I say like my clients and doing the training is my best form of learning.
Yeah. They say iron sharpens iron. So
yeah.
Love it.
They do say that. You are somebody who has 10 years of experience doing this. What do you think is the best piece of advice that you can give to somebody who just had that life-altering experience of going through a neurological injury or neurological diagnosis and now they have paralysis? What do you think is the most critical that they need to know this type of information?
Well, if I would relate it back to what we do, I would say that it's possible for neuroplasticity to happen. Because I feel like, most of the time they're just given the harsh news in the hospital of you're paralyzed, you can't move. In most cases, you're not going to be able to walk again, right? So I guess if I'm drawing it back to more like the scientific side, I would love to tell somebody, no, there's, you can work through trying to like retrain your brain and regain back like function. It's not just like it's gone and it's going to be gone forever. Like it can come back. As far as maybe just a general tip, not relating it specifically to therapy and training, I would say don't push your friends and family away. I feel like being in this 10 years, I've seen obviously a variety of clients and a variety of situations that they have been in. And the clients who I feel are maybe in a better mental state or are, pushing the boundaries of what is deemed of having an injury or being diagnosed with something are the people that have a big community behind them. And obviously, like I said, we have that community aspect here, but you're only in here for a certain amount of hours a week. And so really having that community outside of TPS is huge. And so definitely to not push the people that want to be there for you and help you along the way.
Wasn't what I thought you were going to say, but that was great advice. That's eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah. Around TPS recently, we've been focusing on how people are reinventing their life. Okay. So what is one way that you have seen someone or that you have reinvented your life?
Seen someone as in a client?
Yeah.
Or
anybody.
One, even sure your dad, I'm sure he had to reinvent himself a time or two.
Yeah. I would say that I think first off, knowing that like you still have like the whatever direction you go, it's still important. And, if you had your mindset on something before the injury or before the diagnosis and like you feel that it's not possible, well, maybe it's just possible on a different path. Or maybe this, happened to you to open up new doors and you find a new passion or a new career, or you weren't in schooling before and now it pushes you to go into schooling. I would say, reinvent your life, but, finding the path that works for you, and not being scared of taking a path that you feel like, is it impossible, but it just might take you a little bit longer. You just might have to do it a little bit differently. And that's okay because you're still going to get there.
That reminds me of there's not a one size fits all program, right? Especially when it comes to our program. It's never a one size fits all. You spoke on that on somebody's body or emotions presenting differently each time that they come into the building and then working with that the best that we possibly can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ashton, I wanted to say thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and also just, thank you for continuously educating not only our staff, but our clients and, doing it without having to be asked all the time. You're continuously just inputting yourself into conversations but also educating all the time. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
If you found today's episode to be valuable, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and feel free to leave a review by clicking the link in the description below.
If you have any suggestions, topics, or feedback you'd like for us to follow in upcoming episodes, you can go to our website under the tab Pathways to Healing and fill out the form.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another engaging conversation, giving insight into the paralysis community.
Until then, keep inspiring, stay resilient, and roll on.
These are your hosts, Cody Norman
and Logan Fry,
signing off.